Teresa, welcome to my channel. Thank you for joining me here today. Today I'm going to be showing you how easy it is to make these fun little Christmas decorations from wooden spools and polymer clay and a few little bits and pieces out of your crafty stash. Not a difficult project, not a time-consuming project either as we approach Christmas now. I shall clear these out of the way and I shall be back to show you how it's done. As always, I'll begin with a quick rundown of what I'm using. This is all sort of subject to change. You can substitute whatever you have, whatever theme you want to go for. For the bases of my little ornaments, I'm using these sort of vintage style wooden spools. And these I bought from a local craft shop. Sometimes you can get ribbon and twine that comes on a little spool like this, and keep the spool by all means. Maybe you've got some vintage sewing threads that come on the smaller size spools. They would be lovely, especially if they've still got some thread on. They always look very pretty still with the thread on. So I've got these. I'm going to probably decorate and cover the sides of these. I found this piece of like natural rope. It was a handle off something and I'd hung on to it. And I thought this might be quite nice wrapped around one of them to sort of give a natural sort of feel. So I've kept that. I've also got some little offcuts of scrapbooking paper here. Again, thought that might be a nice way to decorate the spools. I could always use some paint if I wanted to for the ends, but I might just leave the wood showing because I quite like the colour of it. So I've got those. I've got some wire. This is just some florist's wire, but you know, florist wire, craft wire, something that's not too thin. You want it to sort of hold its shape, obviously. So I've got a couple of lengths of these. I have Super Sculpey, which is what I'm going to be using to create my main little thing that sits on the base. I think I'm going to do a gnome and a Christmas tree today. So I've got the Super Sculpey, have a little rolling pin and a mat just to sort of get it softened and pliable so that I can work with it. And then I've picked a selection of little accessories. I probably shan't use all of these, but like with this, a lot of this type of project, I like to just gather anything that I think might be useful. So I've got it to hand and I'm not sort of rummaging through drawers while I'm actually in the process of making something. So I've got some little bells here, little metal bells, a couple of charms. I've got one in the shape of a star. I've got this one here, which is in the shape of a snowflake. I have these little, they look like fairy lights. I think these ones might be a bit big, and I have actually found this little string of them, which is smaller, and I may cut them off the string and use some of those. I've also found some little miniature pine cones and berries, some miniature mushrooms, little painted wooden mushrooms. I have a feeling they may be a little bit big for the scale that I'm working on today. I could make some from the polymer clay. I found a little bead here that says believe. I thought that was quite nice. So I've just sort of gathered those bits together so that I've got a selection of decorations to work with. I have some tools for working with the Super Sculpey for the modelling clay. And other than that, I shall be using some acrylic paint to paint the clay once it's baked, and some glue, probably my hot glue gun, just to assemble things at the end. But I'm going to begin by making my little decorations. I'm going to make a little gnome and I'm going to make a Christmas tree. I was considering whether or not to start off with some tin foil. I might start off with some tin foil for the base just inside. They're not going to be very big, but I think it might just be a way of not having the clay too thick. If the clay's too thick, it takes longer to bake. So I've made two little basic armatures out of tin foil. As I say, these figures are only going to be a few inches tall, maybe sort of 3 to 4 inches at the absolute maximum, about 3 inches I think. And bear in mind that once the clay is on top of the tin foil, it's going to make it bigger, so the foil needs to be quite small. So I've made this sort of shape for my Christmas tree base, a slightly sort of cone shape, and just made this little ball about 1 inch across for the body of my gnome. So I'm going to be starting with the gnome, I think. And I've just rolled out some of my Sculpey here, and I'm just going to gather it round and trim off any excess. And then we can just sort of smooth it using our hands just to cover that. And this will be our little fat body for our gnome. Now, our gnome's going to have a beard. He wouldn't be a gnome without a beard. So I want to cut out a sort of triangular shape for his beard. And I'm just going to smooth the top in. He's going to have a hat and a little fat nose there. And I want his beard sort of coming away, and it'll trail on the floor a bit. We're going to add some detail to that in a moment, but I want to get the rest of his features on. Next I'm going to do him a little nose, and that'll be just made from a small ball of clay. And I think I'll just use a dab of this Bake and Bond bakeable adhesive just to stick him in place. I mean, it should stick in place. It just makes it a little bit more secure if you happen to have some of this. And I'm going to pop that in the center of his beard at the top, right at the top. I'm just going to squish it down a bit. One, that'll help fix it in place, but two, just flattens it down into a slightly better shape. And then what we need to do now is make his hat. So again, going to roll the clay out. And again, this is going to be sort of broadly a triangular shape. And I want to try it for size. And I kind of want to squish this together. Smooth out any joins. And we kind of want to soften this edge here where we've cut it. We don't want it to look too squared off. Once you're happy with the shape, you can pop that in place again. If you want to add a little bit of the adhesive, if you've got some, go ahead. If not, just make sure you've got a good join. And press that down, up and around his nose. And onto the back. One thing I do want to do, and I'm going to pop it at the back so you don't necessarily see it, is just because there's a void inside this hat, I want to make a little hole through the clay to let out any air so that it doesn't sort of blow it open and split it. That way it'll be controlled. I can always fill that in with a little dab of hot glue and then paint over it at the back, and it shouldn't be noticeable. So what I want to do now is add some details. And his beard, I want to run some lines just to add texture to it and make it more like it's made out of hair. And I want to kind of get a little bit of texture on his hat. So I'm just going to use the side of this handle that it'll just stop it from being completely flat. It'll give it a little bit more of a fabric texture, I'm hoping. Just gently. And that should be picked up a bit better when we paint it. And that's our little gnome. So now it's time to make the little Christmas tree. So again, I've rolled out some of my clay and I'm just going to cover the foil basically before we start. So again, just doing it the easy way. Pop the clay in there and cover it over. This will all be covered over, so if it's not perfect, don't worry about it. So that's our Christmas tree base. And I want to roll out the rest of the clay. And I want to cut this into little strips. About 1 centimetre wide. And I want to kind of add a bit of texture to one of the edges. So I've got this tool here that looks a little bit like a comb. And I've actually sort of pulled away clay from the edge. I want to just sort of continue that texture over the whole surface, but just lightly. And then I want to wrap that strip around my tree. Trimming off any excess at the back. We'll just blend that top edge in just for a nice join. And I'm going to take my next strip and do exactly the same. So now we're going to pop this round, start in the same place at the back. I'm keeping all my joins at the back. And I'm going to overlap this slightly. Again, take away any excess and just blend that top join in. And then you should end up with something that looks a little like this. I'm going to pop this on a little board ready to go into the oven, and I can just finalise a little bit of detail. I can't do it while I'm holding it in my hands like this. But I'm now going to take both of these and bake them according to the instructions on the packet if you're using Super Sculpey or Fimo or another brand, and then I'll let them cool and I shall be back to show you how to start assembling and finishing the piece. So my little Christmas tree and gnome are baked, and they're cooling down. They're still slightly warm, but they're just cooling. So while they finish cooling, before I paint them, I'm going to make a start on decorating the spool bases for them. So I've got my hot glue gun here, just got that heating up, ready to add the rope around the centre of one. The other one I'm going to put some of the patterned paper and maybe a little bit of twine on. So that'll be the one that I make a start on while I'm just waiting for the glue gun to heat up. So I've got this bit of paper here. This is a Graphic 45 scrapbook paper. It was a Christmassy sort of themed, wintry themed, and I quite like that. So I'm going to pop this around. I'm going to hold it in place with some PVA glue. This doesn't particularly need a glue gun. And I'm just going to wrap this all the way around. So I've got just some ordinary, this is just garden twine. So I'm going to use a bit of that. Just wrap it round a couple of times and tie it in a bow. Just move that bow round so that it's at the front. And I'm going to pop just a dab of glue on the knot. That'll dry clear, but it should prevent it from just coming undone. And I'll just set that to dry. Now that my glue gun's heated up, to take this piece of rope that I've got, I just want to trim off this edge here a bit that had frayed. I'm just starting with a blob of hot glue. I'm going to get that end stuck down. And again, going to get to the top, trim off the excess. And pop some hot glue in there to stick it down. And that's our second spool covered. I like that, just a nice rustic feel for both of those. You could use wrapping paper, you could use coloured wool or string, some sort of tinsel, something like that. You could just paint them, bit of pattern fabric, all sorts of ideas of what you could use just to decorate these spools. So next I want to decide what's happening on the top of these before I attach my little figures. And I'm trying to just make a decision as to which is going on which. I think I'm having the tall gnome on the tall spool. I'm going to have the Christmas tree on the shorter one. And I want a little bit of moss or fake grass, I think, as the basis for both of them. I'm going to keep it fairly simple today. So I've got things like this, the Woodland Scenics grass and some reindeer moss. I'm going to use a quick and easy way. I think we're just going to put some hot glue on. So I've glued on my little figurines, and I've also glued on a piece of wire. I've just sort of tucked it under the back and glued it on and bent it over, and we're going to have something dangling off the top of this piece of wire on each one. I know I've covered up most of the moss and the grass, it's just the way it goes, but I thought I'll put some on before I try and put these on. And the only reason I've glued these on now is because I just think it's going to be easier for me to paint. I've got something I can actually hold on to. I'll do my best not to get paint on the moss, but you're free to paint these first if you want to, and then attach them to your bases. I'm going to be using acrylic paints. I've got the Arteza tube acrylics here. I've got a selection of reds and greens. I've got black and white and grey, and I've also got a touch of yellow because I need to make a flesh tone for the gnome's nose. And other than that, I'm just going to really just start painting these, adding a little bit of shadow, adding a bit of dry brushing to lighten up, that highlight the textures that we've got. But I'm just going to probably speed this up while I do it, pop a bit of music on again. So just popping some colour into a palette here, and I'm going to go ahead and start painting.
Last year I thought about how things can come around just like that if everyone is here to celebrate one day. We have our ups and downs, but when there's love there's always a way. And oh, this time of year we come together to celebrate. Yes, every time the snow is falling down and it is cold outside, we gather around the fireplace and no one cares about yesterday. My favorite holiday, it means so much more than words can say. And I claim that Christmas is a magic day. Sometimes I tend to forget what glory this holiday represents, but it's fair to say that Christmas is a magic day. This year I'll think about how I'm so lucky to have a place that I can come home to. Yes, I am on my way. We'll put our differences aside and just enjoy this moment of peace and love and happiness. We come together to celebrate. Yes, every time the snow is falling down and it is cold outside, we gather around the fireplace and no one cares about yesterday. My favorite holiday, it means
once the paint's dry, you can start attaching the final things. On this one with the gnome, I'm going to put a little bell at the top on the wire, and on my Christmas tree one I'm going to put this little star-shaped charm. And the way to do that is just take some pliers. These are little round nose pliers, and create a loop. And then you want to drop on whatever it is that you're putting on there. And close the loop up. Difficult to do that on the camera here, but we'll just get that in place. So we've got our little bell hanging above our gnome. And I'll do the same for the tree, like so. And I'm going to add in, I'm going to try and pop on one of these little mushrooms. I do quite like this, and a little miniature pine cone and berries on the one with the gnome. And I'm going to pop on some of these little string lights onto the tree. Again, just dabbing them on with some hot glue. And here are our finished little ornaments. As I say, I've glued on the little string lights and just dabs of hot glue just to hold them in place. Did that off camera because just my hands would be completely in the way the whole time I was doing it. But I really like that, and the little star charm hanging at the top, almost like representing a tree topper. Very pretty, really happy with that, nice and colourful. And then this one here, which I really love as well, with our little gnome, and I glued the little tiny toadstool there by the side of him. You could make one of those out of polymer clay, and a miniature pine cone. Popped a little pine cone and berries at the bottom, and that little bead that said believe. And he's got a little jingly bell hanging at the top there. Really happy with him. Gnome's still very popular with the Christmas decorations here in the UK this year, and I'm assuming elsewhere. These would be, again, a great little gift for somebody. Really nice. You could use them as a little table setting. You could pop a card on with somebody's name if you wanted to make a few of these, if you've got time on your hands. But just for a fun decoration, just to sort of put on the side, put on a shelf, little space somewhere. Really enjoyed it. If you don't have polymer clay, if you don't want to go to the effort of making that, have a look for small cake topper decorations. You can get a lot of, you know, little Santas and snowmen, things like that. What about a small little miniature sisal Christmas tree? You could put one of those on and add a few little decorations to that as well if you wanted to keep it simple. But really happy with these. Not a difficult project, even if you're not experienced with clay at all. But I hope that you enjoyed this. This is the last of my festive decorations this year. I shan't be putting a video up on Christmas Day or New Year's Day. I should be spending time relaxing with my family, enjoying some good food and some fun television and some Christmas movies, as I hope that you all are as well. Wherever you may be, however you're celebrating Christmas, whether you're having large get-togethers or a very quiet, simple celebration, I hope that you are safe and well and happy, and I wish you all the very best for Christmas and for the new year. And I shall see you again soon, but for now, Merry Christmas. Goodbye.